It wasn't the chandeliers or the imported orchids that caught my eye when I walked into the Somerset Ballroom that morning. It was her voice, sharp, commanding, echoing across the marble floor like she owned every inch of it. Tinsley Calder, dressed in head-to-toe white like some kind of bridal influencer, stood in the center of the room waving her arms at my staff as if they were stagehands in her personal production. A young server passed by with a tray of wine glasses. She snapped her fingers, not even looking. "You there! Those glasses are all wrong. Where's the imported crystal I requested?" She spun around dramatically, her eyes scanning the space, and then they landed on me. For a moment, she paused, lips parting in confusion, and then came the smile, not the warm kind, the kind that pulled at the corners of her mouth, like a mask she wore too often. "Oh, my God," she said, pointing at me with manicured fingers. "Can someone get security? There's a homeless woman standing in my event space." My staff froze. The violinist doing sound check actually stopped mid-note. A beat of silence wrapped the room. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just stood there, perfectly still in the hotel I had built from scratch, brick by bloody brick. The same hotel she had somehow managed to book behind my back, using a third-party vendor, with a fake name on the contract. "She's not supposed to be here," Tinsley added, louder this time, her voice rising into a pitch that bordered on theatrical. "Get her out." One of my newer employees took a cautious step forward, clearly unsure. "That's Miss Calder," he said quietly. Tinsley blinked. Then she laughed. "No, sweetheart," she said, brushing her hand through the air like swatting a fly. "Vivian Calder doesn't dress like that. Well, she lives in that sad little house by the vineyard, drives that dusty car. You really think she owns this?" She spun again for effect, arms wide, like a magician revealing a trick. That was the moment, the one I should have screamed, or maybe cried, but instead I smiled. A small, sharp smile only I understood. Because while Tinsley performed for her imaginary followers, while she basked in attention that didn't belong to her, she had no idea that she'd just made her final mistake. She wasn't trespassing in a hotel. She was trespassing in my story. 1 week earlier, the sun in Napa hung low behind the rolling hills when I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house. The vines across the valley had just begun to bloom, thick with the scent of springtime and a kind of memory I had long tried to forget. The porch light flickered like always, never fixed, always ignored, and for a moment I considered staying in the car. But guilt is a stubborn thing. It doesn't wait for a better time. It just calls and you answer. The front door creaked open before I knocked. My mother stood there in a silk blouse 2 sizes too tight, her smile stretched thin like icing over a dry cake. "Vivian, honey," she sang, kissing the air near my cheek. "Still wearing black, I see. You know, a little color wouldn't kill you." I forced a smile. "Hi, Mom." The smell of baked ham and something burnt wafted through the house. My father was already at the dining table, hunched over his plate like it held a secret. He didn't look up. "Dad," I offered. He grunted. That was more than usual. Then I saw her. Tinsley, draped across the love seat like a model mid-shoot, legs crossed, phone tilted just right to catch the light. Her hair was pulled back in a perfect bun, skin glowing with something that didn't come from genetics. "Well, well," she said, standing with a slow, practiced grace. "Look who finally decided to show her face. The elusive vineyard recluse returns. Did you finish alphabetizing your spreadsheets? Or did your calculator break?" I didn't respond. I just stepped around her and sat at the table, across from an empty chair. The dining room was too quiet, the kind of quiet that only happens when a family is pretending. Mother poured wine without asking. Dad kept eating like chewing fast would get him out sooner. And Tinsley, of course, snapped a selfie mid-meal, adjusting her phone angle so my face didn't make the frame. I should have left. But instead, I picked up a piece of bread and tried to believe that this was just another dinner. Then Tinsley clinked her glass. I have something to share, she said, beaming. My 33rd is coming up, and I've decided it's going to be iconic. Kardashian-level iconic. I sipped slowly. I found the perfect rooftop in the valley, she continued. Champagne wall, live jazz, drone footage, even a horse-drawn carriage. Think Paris, but warmer and with better lighting. She paused, letting the room fill with her fantasy. Total cost? Just under $180. I nearly choked. She turned to me, her voice smooth as poison. And you, big sister, get to make it happen. I mean, come on, it's not like you're doing anything real with your money. The room went silent. Even the old clock on the wall seemed to hesitate. I looked at Mom, waiting for her to intervene. She tilted her head. Sweetheart, it really would mean a lot to Tinsley. You've been so blessed lately. Isn't it time you gave a little back? Dad didn't say a word, didn't even blink. That was when it hit me. Not like a revelation, but like a quiet truth finally surfacing. I wasn't family. I was funding. I drove home without turning on the radio. The hum of the engine was the only sound I could stand, steady and unchanging, like the breath I had to remind myself to take. My little house sat tucked between two hills on the edge of the valley, half hidden by olive trees and wild roses I never got around to pruning. The porch light worked here. It always had. Inside, I kicked off my shoes, poured a glass of red, and sat at the kitchen island. No music, no TV, just silence, the kind that stretches out like a blank page and dares you to write something on it. My laptop blinked at me from across the counter, waiting for me to pretend everything was normal. Then my phone buzzed. Aina, check Tinsley's Instagram. I hesitated for exactly 3 seconds before unlocking the screen. And there it was, a video story, a split screen. On the left, Tinsley, wrapped in a designer robe, sipping champagne and laughing with her event planner. The lighting was golden, the music soft and smug. On the right, a video of my car pulling into my driveway. My old Volvo, paint slightly faded from too many summers under the sun. Windows down, my hair pulled back, no makeup. The caption read, "When your rich sister lives like she's in witness protection." I stared. The comments were already rolling in. At least she's not pretending to be someone she's not. That house screams therapy bills. LMFAO, she drives that. My jaw tightened until I thought it might crack. I wanted to say something, to write a long, eloquent post about what it meant to build something from scratch, about nights spent with nothing but coffee and spreadsheets, about how every tile in that hotel had passed through my hands, every beam chosen, every flower planted with intention. But I didn't write a word. I just sat there, staring, as strangers laughed at a life they didn't understand, as my sister turned me into a joke for likes, as the girl I once shared a bunk bed with turned me into entertainment. She thinks this is about a birthday party. She has no idea what she just started. 2 days passed. I ignored every call, every text. Aina even offered to take my phone and throw it into the Napa River, and honestly, I almost let her. But instead, I shut off notifications and buried myself in zoning permits and vendor invoices. I worked like a woman, trying to sand down the edges of her rage. And still the video stayed up. Still the likes climbed. Still, people who didn't know my name reposted it with laughing emojis and hashtags. Aina tapped her fingers on the conference table. She's not going to stop. I know, I said, but she's not the one I'm worried about. She raised an eyebrow, but I didn't explain. Not yet, because I'd seen it coming, not all at once, but in slow pieces, like a leak behind drywall. And now the wall had cracked, and behind it rot. That afternoon, the sky over Napa dimmed behind a layer of silver clouds. I was reviewing vendor contracts when I saw the outline of a woman through the frosted glass of my office door. Familiar posture, too familiar. My stomach sank. Celeste Calder never made appointments. She breezed in like wind through an open gate, arms full, perfume arriving 3 seconds before her. "I thought I'd stop by," she announced, placing a Tupperware of banana bread on my desk. "Still no receptionist? You really ought to make this space more welcoming." I looked up from my screen, forced a smile. "Hey, Mom." She sat down like she owned the chair. "You work too hard," she said, already scanning the room. "Just like your father used to, though he was never great with money. You get that from me." I said nothing. Through the glass wall, I could see Aina watching from the hallway. I didn't signal her in. I knew this one I'd have to carry alone. Then my mother reached into her handbag and pulled out a cream envelope. "I brought something for you to look at," she said lightly, as if it were a birthday card or a brunch menu. I opened it slowly. It was a printout, a budget breakdown. At the top, Tinsley Calder's 33rd birthday Napa Valley Estate event. Midway down, highlighted in pink, venue contribution. Vivian Calder, $180,000. Confirmed. My throat went dry. "Confirmed," I said, my voice sharper than I meant it. Celeste didn't flinch. "Sweetheart," she said calmly, "let's not make this harder than it needs to be. You know Tinsley doesn't have that kind of money. And your father and I, well, we're on a fixed income now." "She humiliated me," I said, jaw tightening, "publicly, on purpose." "She was being playful," my mother replied. "She mocked my life. She's going through a phase." I stared at her. "You're really asking me to pay for the person who used me as a punchline?" "I'm not asking," she said. I blinked. "I'm showing you the plan. You've always been the responsible one, Vivian. This is just what's expected." There it was again. That word. Expected. Not requested. Not offered. Not discussed. Just assumed. I picked up the Tupperware, held it in both hands like a fragile thing. "Thanks for the bread," I said flatly, handing it back across the desk. She looked genuinely surprised. Hurt, even. Like I'd slapped her. "Don't be like this, Vivian. You're making it so dramatic." "I think you've confused the definition of that word," I said. She stood, smoothing the front of her blouse like she'd just closed a deal. "Let me know if you want the planner's contact. You're going to love her. Very boutique." Then she turned and walked out, leaving behind the faint scent of roses, guilt, and entitlement. I didn't tear the envelope. I didn't scream. I just stood at the window, watching the vineyards sway in the wind, jaw locked in place. They didn't ask. They assumed. They never ask. That night, I didn't turn on the lights. I walked through the house with only the low glow from the hallway sconce. The envelope still sat on my desk, unopened now, but not unread. The banana bread sat wrapped in plastic on the kitchen counter, like a peace offering laced with quiet threat. I poured another glass of wine. My hands were steady, but my chest ached like something had been pressed down on it all day. I tried to work, lease renewals, payroll schedules, event permits, but my fingers wouldn't move. My eyes stayed fixed on the screen until the letters blurred. Then, like smoke curling through a crack in the wall, the memory crept in. I was 10. The hospital sheets were thin, itchy against my legs. Machines beeped softly beside me. I'd caught some kind of virus that flattened me for a week. Mom never left. She curled up in the recliner next to my bed, wrapped in her coat, whispering prayers she thought I couldn't hear. "You're the reason I'm strong," she said one night, brushing my hair back from my forehead. "You saved me from myself, Vivian." I remember blinking at her, too tired to speak. I thought it was love. The next night, I woke to her whispering again, but not to me. She was on the phone, her voice low but sharp, furious. "We gave up everything for her," she snapped. "I quit my job, Martin. You're working night shifts like a damn mule. I don't care what it takes. We are not leaving her in some god-awful facility." She paused, then added, "She's all we've got now, so she better be worth it." Then she hung up, and when she turned to me again, her smile was back. Soft, warm, like the words I'd just heard weren't real. "We gave up so much for you, sweetheart," she said. "Just promise you'll never forget that, okay?" I was 10, and I nodded, because I didn't know any better. I thought that was devotion. I didn't understand that it was a contract. Back in the present, I opened the freezer, slid the banana bread inside between the frozen peas and an old bottle of vodka. Closed the door, like sealing a tomb. "I'm not your debt to collect," I whispered. "I'm not your redemption story." I didn't cry. I didn't smile. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something solid under my feet. Like the ground had stopped shifting. Like maybe I wasn't the broken one. I used to think being needed meant being loved. Now I'm not so sure. The next morning, I was at my desk before dawn, the vineyards outside still cloaked in shadow. I hadn't slept, not really, but for the first time I felt awake, alert. Something had shifted in me, a clarity that sliced through doubt like a blade through silk. My inbox blinked impatiently with unread emails, client inquiries, vendor confirmations, requests for tastings. But none of it seemed important now. I was staring at the screen, eyes narrowed, when Aina walked into my office holding a thick, cream-colored envelope. "Courier dropped this off," she said, setting it down carefully as if it might bite. "From Tinsley's fiancé's assistant. Marked urgent. Addressed to you personally." I didn't speak as I opened it. Heavy, embossed paper, gold trim. The kind of document made to impress or intimidate. My fingers stilled as I read. "Family Contact assumes responsibility for all unpaid balances, fees and penalties, including legal and collection costs." I laughed. Short, dry. She really thought I wouldn't read this. Aina crossed her arms. "She thought Guilt would sign it for you." My hand tightened on the contract, not enough to wrinkle it, just enough to feel its resistance. I stayed quiet, staring at the bold print. Anger surged through my chest, not hot, but cold and precise, like the edge of a knife left in ice. Slowly, deliberately, I slid the entire packet into the bottom drawer of my desk. Aina raised an eyebrow. "You're keeping it?" "Evidence," I replied calmly. She handed me the weapon herself. "Let's keep it sharp." I opened a fresh email, addressed it clearly to Tinsley's fiancé's assistant, and typed just one line. "Unsolicited contracts will not be acknowledged. V." Calder! I hit send without hesitation, my heart steady. Then, without another word, I opened my calendar, scrolling to next week, creating a new recurring event titled Monitor Financial Setups Family. Aina smiled slightly, understanding without needing explanation. "Paper trail." "A mountain," I answered softly, returning her gaze. It wasn't revenge, not yet. It was simply strategy, the first move on a chessboard they didn't even know existed. I leaned back in my chair, watching the vineyards slowly brighten as the morning sun broke over the hills. The world outside kept moving, unaware of the silent war beginning in a quiet hotel office in Napa. This wasn't about family anymore. It wasn't even about the money. It was about finally drawing the line between what they expected and what I was willing to give. And this time I was done giving quietly. Saturday morning broke, gently over Napa, sunlight spilling softly across Somerset's elegant facade. Everything felt quiet, almost serene, but inside, a storm was already brewing. I stood at the reception desk, eyes scanning the morning's bookings, when Aina rushed over, her face clouded with worry. "Vivian," she said, voice tense, "did you authorize a private event next weekend?" "No," I replied slowly. "I haven't touched next weekend's calendar." Aina's eyebrows knitted tightly as she turned the screen toward me. My eyes froze on the entry, marked clearly, client name, SC3. My stomach twisted into a cold knot. "She wouldn't," I whispered, more to myself than Aina. Aina tilted her head. "She might." We hurried to the back office, pulling up records, tracing through the bookings made via third-party agencies. My fingers flew across the keyboard, scrolling rapidly until we landed on the reservation confirmation. It was all there, every outrageous detail. Ice sculptures imported from Europe, candles flown in from Provence, even a special sound permit for live music. And under contact details, disguised carefully yet carelessly obvious. SC3 Productions, Tinsley called her. My breath caught sharply. She booked my own hotel, right under my nose. Aina's gaze hardened. She's counting on you backing down in public. My jaw tightened, a quiet, controlled rage simmering beneath the surface. Then let's make sure she earns every inch of it. From the security room, we watched footage from yesterday afternoon. Tinsley strutting confidently through the ballroom, waving directions at her event planner. Her movements dramatic, exaggerated for her imaginary audience, acting like she owned the very ground beneath her feet. She has no idea she's being recorded, Aina muttered quietly. I leaned back, arms crossed tightly, never once taking my eyes off the screen. She thinks I won't dare challenge her openly. Aina glanced at me, understanding dawning across her features. What are you thinking? I took a slow breath, feeling something lock firmly into place inside me. Document everything. Every interaction, every demand, every insult. I want a file so thick it speaks louder than any denial. She nodded once, decisive. Consider it done. We stepped back into the foyer just as the morning bridal brunch began to fill the room with soft laughter and gentle chatter. They moved in quiet celebration, blissfully unaware of the battle quietly unfolding behind closed doors. This wasn't about candles or contracts anymore. It wasn't even about a birthday party. It was about control, about who really owned the name on the gate. And this time, Tinsley had crossed the wrong line. She had unknowingly given me exactly what I needed, a stage, an audience, and a reason. I would not shout, I would not scream, but the message would be unmistakable. She thought she was untouchable. She was about to find out she was wrong. 2 days later, the Somerset ballroom glittered under 1,000 tiny lights. Orchids cascaded elegantly along marble banisters. Golden chairs gleamed beneath ivory linens, and waiters in crisp uniforms moved gracefully through the crowd, carrying trays of champagne. It was perfect, almost painfully so. From my vantage point above the terrace, hidden from view, I watched as Tinsley swept through the grand entrance. Cameras flashed like miniature stars orbiting her. She smiled broadly, her gown shimmering as she waved casually at the carefully curated crowd. Reporters leaned in, eager for her words. The chandeliers were imported from Austria, she said proudly, voice ringing clear and bright. Everything you see here was personally curated. You don't find quality like this just anywhere. A young journalist raised her hand eagerly. And who owns this stunning venue, Miss Calder? Tinsley hesitated, just a heartbeat too long. We have connections, she answered vaguely, eyes darting slightly. Let's just say the owner prefers discretion. That was my cue. I adjusted the cuffs of my navy blazer, straightened my spine, and walked down the grand staircase. Each step calm, deliberate, undeniable. Heads began to turn, whispers following in my wake. Tinsley's confident posture faltered, eyes widening slightly as I approached. The room grew quiet enough to hear the gentle clink of crystal glasses set down hurriedly onto tables. Actually, I said clearly, softly enough to force everyone to lean in, the owner is standing right here. Tinsley's face drained of color, her lips parting silently. Cameras shifted focus immediately, lenses aimed at me like arrows seeking a target. A distinguished woman stepped forward, curious yet reserved. You own this venue? She asked with polite skepticism. Yes, I replied evenly. A smart businesswoman doesn't wear her assets on her sleeve. She builds them brick by brick and lets them speak for themselves. The woman smiled approvingly, her expression shifting from curiosity to respect. How refreshing. It's rare these days to see true discretion paired with genuine success. I inclined my head slightly, accepting the subtle compliment. Around us, the energy had shifted dramatically. Guests murmured appreciatively, turning their backs slowly on Tinsley's glittering facade. In that instant, her carefully constructed illusion crumbled, revealed for what it was, nothing but smoke and mirrors. Tinsley stepped forward abruptly, desperate to regain control. This is some kind of misunderstanding, she stammered, voice shaking. No misunderstanding, Aina interjected calmly, stepping forward with quiet authority. Miss Vivian Calder owns Somerset outright. She built it entirely herself. Tinsley's eyes pleaded silently, but I offered no comfort, no rescue. Vivian, she whispered, almost inaudibly, the name breaking on her lips. I met her gaze steadily, without anger, without pity. You wanted the spotlight, I said simply. Now it's yours. The room was silent as Tinsley backed away, makeup smudged, facade shattered. Reporters scribbled notes furiously. Guests exchanged whispers behind raised hands. I turned slowly toward the crowd, composed and unshakable, feeling their respect like sunlight warming my skin. I hadn't needed revenge. The truth had done it for me. Later that night, I returned home and turned off every light except the soft glow above the kitchen sink. Shadows filled the house, comforting rather than empty. The silence felt different now. It wasn't the kind that choked you, but the kind you chose, the kind earned by walking away clean. As I poured myself a cup of tea, the phone buzzed softly against the counter. The caller ID read Dad. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something urged me to answer. When I picked up, his voice came through hesitant, weary. Vivian, he began carefully, like stepping onto thin ice. Your mother is upset. I didn't respond. He took a shaky breath. We just want the family to stay intact. Intact? I echoed softly. It's never been intact, Dad. It's been built around Tinsley like a house of cards. He didn't deny it. Silence filled the line again, heavy and fragile. Finally, I spoke gently. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. You don't mean that, he whispered. I do. I hung up gently, sliding the phone into the drawer beside the sink, closing it like sealing a quiet goodbye. The distant lights of Napa blinked softly outside the window, small islands of warmth in the darkness. Music drifted faintly from a vineyard tasting room down the road, melancholy and comforting. I stood still for a long while, feeling something new and unfamiliar settle deep within my chest. Not sadness, not joy, just a steady, quiet sense of freedom. My phone buzzed again, a text this time. My hand reached out slowly, half expecting another argument. But instead I found a message that stopped me cold. You were right. I should have stood up. I'm sorry, Dad. I read it 5 times. Then, slowly, deliberately, I deleted it. But as I did, a quiet smile touched my lips. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, nor was it bitterness. It was simply acceptance, something lighter, clearer, sharper. I used to think revenge would taste sweet, like victory or triumph. But it didn't. It tasted like this, a peaceful, quiet exhale, releasing years of guilt that were never mine. Somerset continued to thrive. Bookings flooded in faster than ever before, news outlets sniffed around for interviews, and Aina joked that we'd soon need another location just to handle demand. And yet, none of it felt frantic anymore. Everything felt clear, deliberate, unhurried. Late that night, out of sheer curiosity, I checked Tinsley's social media. Her latest video was muted, stripped of the glamour she once wore like armor. No filters, no background music, just raw silence. I didn't watch all of it, not because I couldn't, but because I didn't need to. I closed the app, turned my phone face down, and took another sip of tea. Maybe that was the real revenge, not winning, not defeating someone else, but choosing myself quietly without explanation. Maybe peace isn't when they finally treat you right. Maybe it's when you start treating yourself like you matter. sitting alone in the soft darkness of my kitchen. I let the silence wrap around me like an old, familiar blanket. The teacup had long since cooled in my hands, yet I held on to it anyway, absorbing its comfort. Outside, Napa slept under a moonless sky, vineyards resting quietly, waiting patiently for dawn. In the calm stillness, I finally understood something that had eluded me my whole life. It wasn't the betrayal or humiliation that had hurt most. It wasn't the way they'd turned my life into a punchline, or even how they'd tried to rewrite my story without my consent. No, it was how easily I'd allowed it. How I'd carried guilt that never belonged to me, paying debts I never owed, chasing acceptance I never needed. All these years, I'd mistaken being needed for being loved, trading my peace for their approval, never noticing that the price kept rising, while my value seemed to shrink. But not anymore. My fingers reached slowly for the drawer beside the sink, pulling out my phone. One more time, I opened the message Dad had sent earlier, the apology he'd never before offered. "You were right. I should have stood up. I'm sorry." I read the words quietly once more, feeling their weight, letting them settle inside my chest. Then, gently but firmly, I deleted it again, not out of anger or resentment, but because I no longer needed anyone else's validation to confirm my worth. Outside, the valley began waking softly beneath the first rays of sunlight. Birds whispered softly in the olive trees, a gentle rustle of leaves greeting the morning. Somerset would soon fill with the quiet hum of staff preparing for another busy day, another wedding, another celebration of life that had nothing to do with proving anything to anyone. And that was the victory, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't demand applause or validation, the kind found in small gestures, in moments spent alone, realizing you're enough. I stood slowly, rinsing the empty cup in the sink, watching the water spiral gently down the drain. If there's one thing I've learned through all this, it's that peace isn't loud or dramatic. It's quiet, subtle. It comes not when the world finally decides you matter, but when you decide that yourself. Maybe you've carried guilt too, debts of gratitude placed on your shoulders without your permission. Maybe you've stood quietly while others rewrote your story, but the pen is still yours. It always has been. This isn't just my truth. It's yours too. Have you ever carried guilt that was never yours to begin with? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your truth. And if this story resonated with you, type 1 or let me know where you're watching from. If it didn't connect, that's okay. Drop a comment and share why. Was it the message, the pace, or the ending? Because here's the truth. Peace doesn't arrive when others finally see your worth. It arrives the moment you do. And that, my friends, is the sweetest revenge of all.